Hello everybody. Welcome to English 2321 British Literature, Gods and Monsters. My name is Dr. Monica Hart and I will be your professor this semester. First of all, I would like to congratulate you for having the great sense and good taste to take a course focusing on British literature. These works are some of the most powerful, beautiful, life-altering literature you will ever read. Now, admittedly, I'm somewhat biased, given that I'm a British literature specialist by profession, but nonetheless, I am sure that by the end of the semester, you will be pleased and proud to know these texts. In this course, we will investigate some of the most famous villains ever created. Grendel from Beowulf and his equally infamous mother, Shakespeare's Macbeth and, of course, the Three Witches, Satan, as imagined by one of the greatest poets of all time, John Milton, Frankenstein's creature, Mr. Hyde from The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and Dracula, Vlad Dracula from Bram Stoker's Dracula. We will be focusing on the intersections between creation and destruction, inspiration and desolation, divinity and monstrosity. Along the way, a few key questions will shape our inquiries. The first and perhaps most challenging question in a course entitled Gods and Monsters is this question. How do we know who or what a god or the god is? How do we know that such a being exists? To help understand how we think about ideas of divinity, a deity, maybe we look to one of the famous philosophical arguments for the existence of God. Perhaps the cosmological argument, which states in its most basic terms that there is a first cause or prime mover that is identified as God, an argument that begins with a claim about the world, such as its containing entities or motion. Maybe we turn instead to the teleological argument, which argues that the universe's order and complexity are best explained by reference to a creator God. Or rather, the ontological argument may hold sway for us, as it is based on arguments about a greater being than which cannot be conceived, holding that if it is logically possible for a God, a necessary being, to exist, then God exists. We might prefer Aquinas' argument from degree to all of these, or maybe the anthropic, or the moral, or the transcendental, all of which ultimately arrive at the same place. God exists. But perhaps we reject the existence of God on the basis of empiricism, holding that the problem of evil contests the existence of a God who is both omnipotent and omnibenevolent, by arguing that such a God should not permit the existence of evil or suffering. Or perhaps we turn to the arguments concerning the contradictions within and between scriptures, or between scripture and known fact. It could be that we prefer an argument such as the one known as the omnipotence paradox, an argument that asks questions such as, can an omnipotent God create a boulder so big that he could not lift it? Maybe we like the no reason argument, one that tries to show that an omnipotent and omniscient being would not have any reason to act in any way, specifically by creating the universe, because it would have no needs, wants, or desires, being that these very concepts are subjectively human. We might like the historical induction argument, one which concludes that since most theistic religions throughout history, for example, ancient Egyptian religion, ancient Greek religion, and their gods ultimately come to be regarded as untrue or incorrect, all theistic religions, including contemporary ones, are therefore most likely untrue or incorrect. All of these arguments arrive at the same conclusion. God does not exist. Or maybe we've never considered seriously enough any of the arguments to say one way or the other, and God either exists or doesn't exist for us on the basis of familial and social training and or personal faith and belief. Whether or not God exists is a huge question, one that is both deeply intellectual and deeply personal for most of us. And it is largely beyond the scope of this course. But one thing that unites all believers and non-believers alike is this, and this is not incidental to the course. From the earliest moments of recorded human history, mankind has grappled with the idea of divinity. And these intellectual wrestlings are illustrated nowhere more clearly than in the artwork of any culture. For our purposes, we will be dealing with literature written in the British Isles from the earliest Middle Ages up until the end of the 20th century, quite a span of time, as well as the other works of art that these literary works have inspired. The next major question we'll address is, how do we decide that something or someone is a monster? What makes actions or deeds monstrous? The creature Grendel in Beowulf, the first text we'll read this semester, is an obvious example of a monster. He's described as a descendant of Cain, a demon. He's clearly not human, something other, something different. He makes no attempts to integrate himself into human society. In fact, he is bent on destroying the small human society near him. So maybe that's what makes a monster. A being so outside the framework of accepted human standards of behavior that his or her or its actions are reprehensible, unforgivable, unthinkable. Well, if that's so, then does a monster, quote unquote, have to be a fantastic non-human creature? What about very real human beings who do things that are reprehensible, unforgivable, unthinkable? Adolf Hitler, leader of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, commonly known as the Nazi Party, an architect of one of the 20th century's most grotesque abominations, the systematic murder of as many as 17 million civilians, including an estimated 6 million Jews targeted in the Holocaust, between 500,000 and 1.5 million Roma, or commonly known as gypsies, including the children you see pictured here, who all died at the Auschwitz concentration camp. Poles, Soviet civilians, and, pictured here, Soviet prisoners of war. The mentally ill, the mentally retarded, and people with physical disabilities whose prosthetic aids and walking aids were removed from them by the Nazis. Jehovah's Witnesses, political and religious opponents, and homosexuals, pictured here wearing the infamous pink triangle. 20th century in America has given us, tragically, no shortage of figures to point to and call monsters. Serial killers Jeffrey Dahmer, Gary Leon Ridgway, Ted Bundy, Charles Manson, and Eileen Wuornos, whose life and crimes were the subject of a major motion picture starring Charlize Theron and Christina Ricci entitled Monster. In this course, we're going to deal with both sorts of monsters, those who take non-human form and those who are all too frighteningly human. The last question we'll deal with: why do monsters appear so frequently in literature? Why do some literary monsters continue to haunt us even centuries after their creation? Why are we, hundreds of years later, still talking about certain monsters? Why does Frankenstein's creature show up on everything from cereal boxes to t-shirts to comic books to coloring books to little children's toys? Why are vampire novels, which owe much to Bram Stoker's Dracula, no matter what we may think of the modern incarnation, some of the most popular young adult novels in print today? Why do we keep gravitating back to these figures? What do they tell us about our fascinations and our fears? To answer these questions, we're going to read masterpieces from multiple genres and subgenres: epic poetry, the novel, lyric verse, tragedy, and, not surprisingly, probably drama, gothic, science fiction, and, yes, humor. I very much look forward to getting to know all of you this semester. I can't wait, seriously, to hear your thoughts and ideas and reactions to this collection of marvelous literature. See you soon.